Narrator calm, eerie tone. Our homes are supposed to be the one place we can finally let our guard down. You lock the doors, close the curtains, turn off the lights, and breathe a little easier knowing you're safe behind four walls. But here's the chilling truth. Locks can be broken, doors can be picked, and sometimes the danger isn't outside. It's already inside. Think about it for a moment. Right now, as you sit in your room watching this video, how sure are you that you're truly alone? That creak in the hallway, that faint sound from the kitchen you brushed off as the house settling. What if it wasn't? What if someone was already there, waiting, watching? Tonight, we're diving into 3 terrifying true home intrusion horror stories. These aren't just tales from a movie script. These are real experiences people lived through and barely escaped. In the first story, you'll hear about a college girl who woke up to footsteps in her living room. Footsteps that didn't belong to anyone she knew. Then, we'll move to the suburbs, where a family trusted their friendly neighbor, only to uncover a nightmare living far too close to home. And finally, a man who thought he was safe in his own apartment, until he discovered he wasn't nearly as alone as he believed. Each story will make you second-guess just how safe your home really is. And if you love chilling true horror stories, make sure you hit subscribe right now and tap the bell so you don't miss the nightmares waiting in future uploads. Trust me, you won't want to watch these alone in the dark. So lock your doors, check your windows, and settle in, because these are 3 scary true home intrusion horror stories. Narrator, slow, chilling tone. It was a stormy night in October, the kind of night where the rain doesn't just fall, it pounds. Each drop against the window felt like a tiny warning. Emily, a 21-year-old college student, was lying in bed in her small off-campus apartment. She had been up late studying, and exhaustion pulled her into a restless sleep. The world outside was loud, thunder growled, wind howled, branches scraped against the siding. But inside, everything felt still, safe, or so she thought. At around 2 a.m., Emily's eyes shot open. She couldn't explain why at first. It wasn't a nightmare, it wasn't the storm. It was something else. Pause. Footsteps. Very faint but definitely there. The soft, deliberate sound of someone moving across her living room floor. At first, she let her half-asleep brain try to explain it away. Her roommate. It had to be her roommate. But then she remembered her roommate had gone home for the weekend. Emily was alone. Completely alone. Her stomach sank. Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up slowly, straining her ears. The footsteps weren't stopping. They were moving back and forth, pausing occasionally like whoever it was looking through things. And then, clear as day, the low, creaking sound of the refrigerator door opening. Emily's hands shook as she reached for her phone on the nightstand. Her heart leapt when she saw the screen. It was dead. She had forgotten to plug it in before bed. No way to call 911. Now her breathing was too loud. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She gently, carefully, slipped out of bed and pushed a chair under her door handle. It was the only thing between her and whoever was out there. Pause. Soft suspense music rises. The footsteps grew louder, closer, moving down the hallway, and then her bedroom doorknob rattled. Emily slapped her hand over her mouth to muffle the scream that nearly escaped. The knob twisted once, twice, slowly. Then silence. For several minutes, she heard nothing. Just the storm outside. And just when she thought maybe the intruder had left, she heard it. A whisper. She couldn't make out the words, but it was right outside her door. Low, male, muttering. She backed up against the far wall, clutching herself, tears running down her face, praying that the chair would hold. Minutes dragged into hours. The whispering stopped, but Emily didn't dare move. Every sound from outside, every creak, every groan of the storm, felt like it could be him. She sat there, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the door until the first rays of sunlight bled into her room. When morning finally came, she mustered the courage to slowly push the chair away and open her door. The living room looked like a nightmare frozen in time. Drawers pulled open, cabinet doors ajar, the fridge slightly cracked open, food missing. Muddy footprints tracked across the floor, footprints too large to be hers. And on the kitchen counter, a knife. Not hers. Not her roommate's. A large, sharp kitchen knife that had been placed neatly in the center, as if whoever was there wanted her to see it. Emily ran to a neighbor's apartment and called the police. When officers arrived, they swept the place, checking every corner, every hiding spot. The intruder was long gone. But the chilling part wasn't what they found, it was what they didn't. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, which meant whoever had been in Emily's apartment had a key, or had been inside long before she went to bed. The police told her something she would never forget. Based on the footprints and the way things were left, this wasn't a random break-in. Someone had been watching her, studying her. They knew when her roommate was gone. They knew her schedule. For weeks, maybe even months, someone had been waiting for the right night. Music drops, soft echo effect on narrator's voice. Imagine that for a second. Sitting in your own home, thinking you're safe, while someone is outside or worse, inside, learning everything about you. Emily moved out within days. She never spent another night in that apartment. The intruder was never caught. And sometimes, late at night, she swears she still hears faint footsteps when she's trying to sleep. Pause. Narrator lower, slower. So tell me, if you woke up to footsteps in your home tonight, would you be brave enough to open your door? Or would you wait, listening, knowing someone was just on the other side? Narrator, steady, uneasy tone. The Wilson family lived in what most people would call the perfect neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, friendly faces, block parties in the summer. It was the kind of place where kids rode bikes until dark and nobody worried too much about locking their doors. Their neighbor, Mr. Hensley, was part of that picture-perfect setting. He was in his late 60s, gray-haired, always wearing a pressed button-up shirt even when mowing his lawn. He waved at everyone. He offered to collect packages when people were away. He even brought cookies over during the holidays. To the Wilsons, he was just a kind, if slightly lonely, old man. But sometimes he was a little too involved. Mrs. Wilson mentioned how he'd show up unannounced, like he knew when her husband wasn't home. Their daughter, Chloe, said he stared too long when she got back from school. But the family brushed it off. He was just being friendly, right? At least that's what they told themselves. Pause. Music shifts darker. Started small. The back door left unlocked. At first, they thought it was just forgetfulness. Everyone makes mistakes. But then, they began noticing little things moved. Nothing missing. Just shifted. A glass out of place. A chair slightly angled differently. Chloe swore her bedroom window, which she always kept closed, had been opened one morning. Her parents told her it was probably just her imagination. Until one night, Chloe woke up and screamed. She told them she saw a man's shadow standing in the hallway, tall, unmoving. By the time her father checked, the hallway was empty. He comforted her, told her it must have been a dream, but deep down, he couldn't shake the unease that crawled up his spine. Pause. Sound of faint creaking attic boards. A week later, while working late in his study, Mr. Wilson heard it, soft thuds coming from the ceiling above him. Not the pipes, not the wind, something moving in the attic. First he froze. Then, grabbing a flashlight, he pulled down the ladder and climbed up. What he found would stay with him forever. There, in the dusty insulation, was a small nest. Old blankets arranged into a makeshift bed. Food wrappers stacked in the corner. Empty water bottles. And worst of all, Polaroid photographs. Photographs of his family. Sleeping. Eating dinner. Sitting on the couch. And one photo that made his blood run cold. Chloe, asleep in her bed, the picture taken from just a few feet away. Music rises, slow dread. He stumbled back down, slammed the attic shut, and called the police immediately. When officers searched the space more thoroughly, they confirmed it. Someone had been living in their attic, watching them, waiting until they slept to creep through the house. The police investigation revealed the truth, and it was worse than they imagined. Mr. Hensley, the neighbor they trusted, waved to, shared cookies with, had made a copy of their house key months earlier. No one knew exactly how. Maybe during one of his helpful visits. Maybe he found it left out once and made a quick copy. However he did it, it gave him unlimited access to their home. Every night, after the family went to bed, he would slip inside. Sometimes he'd eat their food. Sometimes he'd just watch them. And sometimes he'd take pictures. For months, this had been happening right under their noses. The Wilsons were horrified. Their supposed friend, their harmless neighbor, had been invading their lives in the most personal, terrifying way imaginable. Pause. Music fades lower, soft and reflective. Narrator slower, almost whisper. It's one thing to fear strangers, to fear the idea of someone breaking in from the outside. But what happens when the danger isn't a stranger at all? What happens when it's the person who smiles at you every morning? The person you wave to when you pull out of the driveway? The person you trust, simply because they live next door? The Wilsons moved soon after. They couldn't stand to stay in that house, not after what they'd learned. Mr. Hensley was arrested, but the damage was already done. Their sense of safety, their belief in the comfort of their own home, it was shattered forever. Music shifts darker, soft pulse like a heartbeat. And here's the part that should make you pause right now as you listen. How well do you really know your neighbors? Are they just being friendly? Or are they watching, learning, waiting for a moment when you least expect it? Sometimes the scariest intruder isn't the masked stranger breaking through your window. Sometimes it's the person next door. Narrator low, steady tone. Daniel was 29, living alone in a small apartment on the edge of the city. He worked late nights at an IT job that left him drained, the kind of exhaustion where you just collapse into bed without even turning on the TV. Most nights followed the same pattern. Dinner around midnight, scrolling through his phone for a bit, and then finally sleep. His apartment wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with a narrow hallway connecting the bedroom to the kitchen. But to him it was enough. Quiet, simple, safe. At least that's what he thought. One night, Daniel came home even later than usual. Past 2 a.m. He tossed his keys on the counter, kicked off his shoes, and went straight to bed. The city outside was restless as always, but inside his apartment, the silence wrapped around him like a blanket. Hours later, sometime before dawn, Daniel stirred awake. His mouth was dry, his throat scratchy. He decided to get a glass of water before going back to sleep. Still half asleep, he padded out into the hallway. The apartment was dark, the only light a faint glow from the street lamp bleeding through the blinds. And that's when he saw it. At the very end of the hallway stood a figure. Tall, motionless, just standing there. Daniel blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, convinced he was still dreaming. But when he opened them again, the figure was still there, dark and solid, blocking the faint light. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to move, but his body refused. For a full 5 seconds, he stood there, staring at the shadowy shape that refused to vanish. Finally, adrenaline snapped him into action. He spun on his heels, sprinted back into his bedroom, and slammed the door shut. His hands shook as he locked it, fumbling the deadbolt with trembling fingers. Pause. Sound of shaky breathing, heartbeat like music. Daniel grabbed his phone and dialed 911, whispering frantically into the receiver. He told the dispatcher that someone was inside his apartment, that he wasn't imagining it. They told him to stay calm, stay quiet, and wait. But as the minutes dragged by, every sound in the apartment made him jump. The faintest creak of floorboards, the hum of the fridge. He was sure, absolutely sure, that the figure was still out there, standing silently in the hallway. Finally, flashing red and blue lights painted the blinds. Police arrived, pounding on the door, announcing themselves. Daniel rushed out, heart hammering, desperate for answers. Officers swept the apartment, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found confirmed Daniel's worst fear. There were clear signs of forced entry. His front door's lock had been tampered with. Scratches and dents around the frame. Someone had broken in. But here's the detail that still haunts him to this day. The officers checked every corner, every hiding spot. And in his bedroom, the very room he had locked himself inside, they found the closet door slightly ajar. Inside were fingerprints, smudges all over the inside of the door. The intruder hadn't just been standing in the hallway. They had been inside the apartment for hours, hiding, waiting for the perfect moment, maybe even waiting for him to fall asleep and never wake up. Pause. Music drops to near silence. Daniel was lucky that night. Lucky he woke up. Lucky he went for water. Lucky he saw the figure before it was too late. But luck isn't much comfort when you realize how close you came to being a headline. The intruder was never caught. No fingerprints matched. No leads turned up. Whoever it was slipped back into the night, vanishing as if they'd never been there at all. But Daniel knows what he saw. And he knows, deep down, that if he hadn't woken up thirsty that night, his story might not have been told at all. Music builds slow, ominous. Narrator reflective, low. Think about that for a moment. Your closet, your hallway, the quiet spaces of your home you never even glance at before going to bed. How sure are you that they're empty? How sure are you that you're really alone? Because sometimes the person you fear isn't breaking in to steal. Sometimes they're breaking in to wait. Narrator, steady, thoughtful tone. 3 stories. 3 nightmares that should never have happened inside the one place we all trust the most, our homes. A college girl, stalked and watched until the night a stranger finally slipped inside. A family, betrayed not by some faceless intruder, but by the man who smiled at them every morning. And a man, alone in his apartment, who discovered the horrifying truth that he hadn't been alone at all. Each story different, yet all connected by the same chilling thread. We think of our homes as fortresses. For walls, a roof, a locked door, these things are supposed to protect us, to shield us from the dangers outside. But what if those locks, those walls, those routines are nothing more than an illusion of safety? Because if someone is determined enough, they'll find a way in. That's what makes these stories so terrifying. They don't take place in abandoned asylums or haunted woods. They happen in kitchens, in bedrooms, in hallways you've walked 1,000 times. The danger doesn't always announce itself. It waits, silent and patient, in the spaces we feel most comfortable. And maybe that's the scariest truth of all. Pause. Music dips lower, almost a whisper. So tonight, before you go to sleep, check your doors. Check your windows. Pay attention to that sound in the dark you usually brush off. Because sometimes the house settling isn't just the house. Sometimes someone really is inside. Music swells, eerie but fading into calm. And if stories like these make your heart race, if you love exploring the darkest corners of real horror, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss what's coming next. Because these were just 3 stories, and there are so many more.